What's up, friends? Welcome back to another episode of NFT 365. And tell you what, this is an episode I'm excited to kind of bring to life as I've been really focusing on how do we rethink or even reimagine since I was at Disney World the idea of community in Web 3 and like what are the key components that I feel, especially over this last 18 months, that we can learn around the key components of community, and even in a way, like, where have we been limited because we've been using Discord and Twitter, and what are some of the things that we have to kind of like to really just kind of break down in regards to true community building. And I'm thinking about it both from an NFT project founder perspective, but also a NFT collector perspective. And so I'm going to jump into that for today's episode. But before we do so, of course, definitely want to get a shout out to our sponsor, Crypto Business Conference. We are counting down the days till we get to go to beautiful, sunny San Diego. Of course, even if you can't go to San Diego, you can get your hands on the on-demand tickets, which I will talk about near the end of the show. Of course, we've been doing a throwback to different NFTs that we've minted over the last year as we count down to that 365 number, which is kind of just wild to think about in a bigger picture. And we're not going to actually just do a highlight, but I just wanted to give a shout out that 7 months, around 7 months after the project launched, this project, during the 7 months that this project launched, they've done collaborations with big brands. They've had parties in New York City. They've done partnerships with other projects. They've done Twitter Spaces on a regular basis. They've been building really and fostering an amazing community. And crazy enough is that last night they actually sold out. So my shout out is to the 90s Babes NFT project. We minted them back in March on first day there of that project, and they are the epitome, in my opinion, of a slow burn that is really building a magical community because they weren't put off by the fact that they didn't mint out right away. I remember they minted a bunch of them immediately, and of course we had one of their co-founders, Danielle, here on the podcast a little couple, I guess it was a couple months ago, and we talked about that. But I loved seeing the 90s Babes mint out yesterday, so definitely want to give them a shout out. All right, so now let's jump into this idea of one of the things that I'm really been pondering is that, like, what when we think about, like, I'm a big fan that I believe limitations inspire creativity, but I also believe limitations, especially in an early adoption phase, can foster laziness, and it can get us programmed to kind of like get stuck in our ways because of the current limitations of what we're using. And so one of the things that I've been trying to look at, and I've been working with brands and businesses to build online communities since about 2011. This is something I've been doing for almost a dozen years now. And I've talked about that throughout the podcast, right? The idea of, like, what are some of the things that make communities fail? What are some of the things that communities struggle with? And I will just say that I think one of the things that we just have to kind of own is that it's not really just about, like, what are the keys to community success, but one could argue what does a Web 3 community ultimately look like, feel like, and what does it need for success? And I think this is where, for me, it's going to fall into what I've now deemed the 8 C's, the 8 C's of a Web 3 community. And I'm actually going to, the order of these 8 C's is actually very important as well. And so I'm going to break them down. I'm not going to go like super deep into each one because I'm going to do a dedicated episode for each of these eight between now and the end of this season. So I'm going to kind of cover the eight in this episode, and then in future episodes we'll break down all eight of these different components. I think they're essential right now, and there's something that we have to think about because I have a feeling that at the end of this episode, you might not want to think, you might not launch a Discord, you might not put all your eggs in the Twitter basket, but you also might just want to rethink your entire structure and focus of the community that you're trying to build around your NFT project. I'll also say, just a little preview, I've been outlining about 40 different use case categories for NFTs in kind of in the next 18 months. And so that'll be something I'll kind of break down in an episode as well, and actually led into this episode. So with that being said, let's jump into number one. And number one might sound, for those here on the podcast, might sound like I'm, maybe it's like I'm just drinking the consistency Kool-Aid. But number one, the number one C is consistency. Now, but here's the key of these. Like, I'm gonna give you these 8 terms, but the 8 terms, don't take them at face value. Well, I'm gonna give you a little clarification, because this is regards to community, right? So we're not talking about just content creation. We're not talking about NFT project business building. We're talking about Web3 community as a whole. Like, what should NFT projects be thinking about, looking about? And so number one is consistency. And here's the thing about consistency: it's about having a consistent location, a consistent schedule, and even a consistent message with what that community is all about, and that how important that is. Because I can tell you, we've had a couple of people jump in back into our Discord recently, and they're like, "Hey Brian, I spent the summer away from Web3, but I knew that I could jump back into the Discord and catch up with what's going on." And part of that is like that consistent home or consistent hub that exists. So number one, that first one is consistency, right? Having that consistent location, or even just a consistent place that people know that you are showing up every day. Could be something like this podcast, right? Like that. It's that no, even if someone disappeared or isn't active over a period of time, they're not going to be confused or lost or not know where that they can look for that community, that connection to community as we move forward. Number two is communication. Now this one is a big one, right? Because and it kind of ties into the idea of really where we were going with consistency. And what I mean by communication is that this is the spot where it's about the message, like your announcements, the updates, and things that are happening. And I think this is one that we've been just really lazy with as a whole in Web3, right? The idea that we need to make sure we get our messages, that the communication of our holders, our current holders and future holders, this communication must be something that is broadcasted out there, and we need to make sure that we have that as one of our key focuses. But here's the piece of it that is important: is that it is not the same as number three. Number three is conversations. So number one being consistency, being vital. Number two being communication. Now, conversations, in my opinion, might end up being one of the most confused components of current Web3. Because for many of us, if we said, where does the conversations of your community live today? You would probably say Discord. And what I'm going to say is conversations are different than group chat. And the other part of this that I think is important is that if you would have said Twitter or Twitter Spaces, or even that those more things are about content creation, right, or experience creation. So conversations, really, what is so important about this is it's about the people, right? So if communication is about the message, conversations have to be about the people connecting with other people, and ultimately having conversations around something that they share, right? And that's a key component here of community. And I would argue most Discords, including ours here on the podcast, we kind of lost the focus to have focused conversations around things that are most important to our community. And instead, we just have all these Discord channels with random conversations happening everywhere, which ends up just it's no longer conversations. Those are now what we just consider noise. Number four kind of ties perfectly into that conversations piece, but it takes it a step further. And number four is collaboration. Now, I'm a huge I believe the future of innovation will be powered via collaboration. But collaboration is about that mutually beneficial relationship and those connections that we make member to member, right? So this is one of the reasons that I think most of us look at Discord being vital, is that it allows us to connect with others that hold the NFT or that are part of this community. Now, Discord doesn't have to be the place that they live, but collaboration is not possible unless it is mutually beneficial. And what I mean by that is that means that everyone that is a part of it realizes that they're either they're contributing, or they're contributing as much as they're taking, but they're also playing that role where even if their role is simply being the consumer of things that are happening, that is their role within collaboration. So that's a key component. Number four being collaboration. Now, number five, I think, is one that is maybe we take for granted in Web3, but it's probably not as um, it's not as dialed in as we might think, and that is commitment. So number five is commitment in our eight C's. And what I mean by commitment, I mean commitment is that it's the share. It's about that, like, we all have the same skin in the game, right? We all are, and this comes down to about managing expectations, right? How committed is everyone that is a part of this community? Now, it does not mean we have to have the same levels of commitment, but it does mean we need to have a managed expectations of what are the commitment levels that we expect for this community to grow or to accomplish what they need to accomplish. And I think in many cases we just like make silly assumptions like, oh well, if someone bought an NFT and they're holding it, they have the same commitment to this project success as everyone else that holds it. Well, that's not true. We know that, right? And there are some people that are going to be more active or less active, but managing those expectations so people know, hey, you don't have to be active in this community every single day, but by not being as active, these are the things that might not be as readily available for that member versus someone that is. So number five being commitment. Number six is probably the one that I've been on the soapbox the most about as of recently, which is customization. Like, I believe this is where a lot of early adoption products and services and even apps fail. I think Clubhouse, in my opinion, failed massively because they did not enable collaboration or customization at the user level, right? So I wasn't able to customize my notifications. I wasn't able to customize how I showed up in some rooms versus other rooms. And so this to me is like your choose your own adventure customizations, right? I could have used that C for choose your own adventure, but we're going to go with customization. And I think customization of experience, right? Like, I think for some Web3 communities, offering merch might be appealing to some, but to others they have no interest in merch, but they might care about having a metaverse component, right? And so I think these are things that we have to factor in, but we also have to make sure that customization is a key component of our Web3 community building. All right, number seven, we're pushing through. Number seven is content. And I mean, I can't hit this one home enough. And I think this is I think actually one of the things that Discord has broken us. We haven't done a great job of creating content as a whole, as an NFT, let's just say as an NFT entity. Partially is it because that Discord doesn't manage content well, and we're pretty lazy with content. I mean, I can't tell you how many Discords I've gone into, and the same Gary V MetaMask wallet video from YouTube is shared in every single one of them. And for me, what does that say is that, like, oh, we're so not committed to this community that we're not even going to take the time to create our own white labeled or customized onboarding video, or don't get your wallet hacked video, right? So I think content has to be a key one. But let's link content and conversations are part of what has been broken in Web3 community. I believe we have lost the idea that if we are creating content, we need to facilitate the conversations to happen around the content. And then collaboration can be where that member to member connection exists, right? And I didn't use connection as one of them. And the reason I didn't use connection as one of the eight, and maybe you can make the argument that it should be the ninth, but connection to me is key in every one of these things, and they are all about strengthening the connection. So one might argue that, I say the future of business is community. I could argue that the success of Web3 community is about connection. And that last piece of that connection, and this is number 8 in our 8 C's of Web3, is culture. And remember, culture and community, that that idea of, like, what are the things that we uphold, what are our values, right? What is the mission and the vision, and what is the collective purpose, And then the other part of that culture is having that commitment, right, which we talked about before, and having that shared commitment for a desired outcome, right? And we have that shared passion for what we want to achieve. And so these are the 8 C's, in my opinion, that are essential for Web3 community growth, for Web3 community reimagining what community it looks like. And I would argue man, most most projects maybe have 3 of these as a focus, maybe 4 of them as a focus. But sadly, consistency is not one that most NFT projects have, right? I don't think they've figured out that one at all. I think collaboration has been a lazy attempt. We just throw like a channel and we call it collaboration channel or share your win channel. I know for a fact customization has not been one that has been a premium or a focus. And then, of course, content and culture have been something that most projects are being exposed by right now. The fact that they don't have either, and it makes it really hard to survive things like a bear market or crisis management and so on. So, when I look at the 8 C's of Web3, and maybe we could argue for that ninth one being connection, but I actually think connection is the key thread here that goes through them. What I want to challenge everyone, and this is what I'm going to do with our team this week, this upcoming week, is we're going to look heavily at what are the tools we're using, what are the people and the resources that we are spending for each one of these things, and then we're going to kind of reverse engineer and start asking ourselves like, okay, what needs to be there, what needs to be created, and I'm afraid that partially what needs to be created is a Web3 community hub that is outside of Discord and doesn't just use Twitter. And that to me is a little scary because now we have to shift our audience somewhere new. But let's face it, what we are currently doing for Web3 community is not working. If you belong to more than 4 Discords, there's so much noise, so much disconnection. It's impossible to keep up, right? And if you're been a part of a community for an online, a Discord for a long period of time, or even a Twitter, you're following a project on Twitter for a long period of time. Let's face it, you don't even know how often they tweet, when their Twitter spaces are. Like that layer of consistency has also been broken there as well. So those are the 8. As I mentioned, I'm going to take each one of them over the next, let's just say 45 days. And I'm going to break down each one of them. We're going to do one day on each. And I will kind of tie this thread all the way through. But I would love to hear your thoughts. Share them out on Twitter, tag me, or just even use hashtag NFT365. What are the things that you think are the key pillars of a Web3 community? And remember, this is about reimagining what a digital community looks like, because I believe most, if not all, digital communities haven't really been community focused or scalable or sustainable over a long period of time. And I've been a part of some great ones, but eventually they broke down. Eventually they stopped being able to accomplish what they were put there to accomplish. And I believe part of it is because they weren't kind of expanding into these 8 key pillars that I mentioned here on the podcast. Of course, definitely want to give a shout out to our sponsor, as I mentioned at the beginning. We'll be heading out to San Diego in a couple of weeks, October 9th to the 11th. And if you want to get an on-demand ticket, if you can't attend there in person, you can definitely do that over at socialmediaexaminer.com/NFT365. Great event. So much things that are going to be shared. The idea of collaboration exists there. The idea of great content exists there. And if you want to learn from great content creators, there's also some amazing content creators that I know that have bought their tickets that are going to be there as well. So I look forward to seeing many of you there in San Diego. And the last thing I'll just kind of throw out there is that, one of the key components of community is creating a swim lane, right? Or creating an environment that allows members to connect with members, right? Like I look at like a true community is that, the founder, yes, the founder might have to handle the consistency and the communication, but then for the most part, they get out of the way when it comes to conversation, collaboration, culture, and they also kind of work together with the community for things like customization and content creation. But I think more so than anything else, we have to think about like what is that connection thread that we are, how are we like helping our members connect with each other? And is that really a group chat on Discord in a random thing called open chat? Or should we actually be facilitating those conversations around content or around collaboration opportunities and not where they exist at the moment? For me, I actually think that's the answer. My answer to this whole thing is that I believe, I'm gonna we're gonna report back after we do some things. We break this down on our team, but one of the things that I just think is that I believe our podcast Discord probably would have been a more productive and a more established community if, rather than having different channels for different topics, it was rather just a channel for each episode. And within each episode, we allowed conversations to happen there. And then we grew areas of collaboration from there. Remember, my friends, I do believe the future of business is community. I strongly believe, of course, it is our mantra here at the podcast, that we are greater than me. But I'm also just going to put this out there that I don't think we've figured out what are those key components of Web3 yet. But I think I'm getting closer. And hopefully, with your help, we will all be able to kind of build this out and together create the communities that I believe will change the world. Until tomorrow, my friends, make it a great day. Cheers.